"They were a little crunchy, even for me," the polar bear said. "And I've known some cold fish in my time. Literally, I mean." Patrick nodded meekly. "I was not referring," the polar bear continued, "to the common idiom meaning an unfeeling, hard-hearted individual, although I've known a few of those in my time, too. The Atlantic walrus. Now there's a cold fish. Shallow divers. Like to keep themselves to themselves. Paranoid, too. Always think we're going to eat them, which I suppose we occasionally do." Patrick gulped. He wiped a shaky hand across his damp forehead. Here was a polar bear talking about eating walruses. Walruses were very large animals with big tusks. If the polar bear felt he could tackle a walrus for lunch, a 12-year-old boy would surely not be much of a problem. "The cat does seem to have got your tongue, rather, doesn't it?" the polar bear said. "You do speak, don't you? Or do you just squeak? The Arctic tern. Now there's a squeaky bird, always twittering on about this and that." Patrick made an attempt at clearing his throat. He didn't want the polar bear to mistake him for an Arctic tern. Did polar bears eat birds? Was there anything they didn't eat? This one seemed to like chicken Kievs. I'm sorry," Patrick said, his voice coming out clearer this time. "I do speak. I guess I'm just not used to finding polar bears in the garage on a Sunday evening." "No one is much used to finding polar bears," the polar bear said thoughtfully. "We're an elusive lot, except when we're hungry." With that, the polar bear heaved himself out of the freezer and moved towards Patrick. Patrick retreated in horror, flattening himself against the garage door. He felt something crunch under his trainer, probably a bauble. He shut his eyes, bracing himself for the white light and the cherubs with the tiny wings. He was about to become a polar bear's dinner. Time seemed to slow down as Patrick waited for the end. He decided he'd had a short but fulfilling life. He'd seen England reach the final in the European Cup. He'd ridden the vampire at Chessington World of Adventures and not been sick. He'd been runner-up in the junior talent contest with his best friend Tommy Jenkins, who had moved away in Year 6, even though their disappearing trick had gone wrong and the audience could see Tommy's toe sticking out from under the sheet they'd borrowed from Tommy's nan. Better than that, Patrick had won first prize in Year 4 for the Peter Pan costume his mum had made for him on World Book Day. Luckily, everyone had been too young to make fun of his green tights. It hadn't been a bad sort of life. As Patrick was thinking all this, he realized he was still alive. Very slowly, he opened one eye. The polar bear was standing in front of him, holding out a paw. Patrick opened his other eye. The polar bear didn't move. He simply held his paw out patiently. He felt himself reaching for the polar bear's paw. He wasn't able to shake it exactly. He wouldn't have risked his fingers between the polar bear's claws. Still, it was a handshake of sorts. Patrick pressed his hand against the polar bear's large padded paw, and they moved their paws, hands, in an up-and-down motion that resembled a handshake. "It is customary," the polar bear said, "when making a preliminary introduction accompanied by a handshake, that the two parties involved reveal their names." "Oh," Patrick said, "it's Patrick. Patrick Jolly." The polar bear straightened himself. "Wilbur, Ambrose, Cedric, Barnaby, Montague. The third," he added. "But most call me Monty." Patrick had never known anyone with 3 middle names, and he wouldn't have said the polar bear was a Monty. He looked like he should have a name that was more fierce somehow, more suited to a polar bear, maybe something like Fang or Crusher. Patrick supposed people didn't always suit their names. There had been a boy at his primary school who wore large square glasses and often had his jumper on inside out. His name was Bradley, but Patrick had always seen him as a William. What sort of name would someone give to a non-threatening polar bear? He definitely didn't want to encourage the polar bear to be more fierce. He tried to think of something more cuddly, something a polar bear at a zoo might be called. "What is it?" the polar bear asked. "It's just, you don't really..."